says it's a goal.
I'd like to call to order the Bedford Township Board meeting, April 2nd, 2019. If we could all stand. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. If I could have Steve Hobbins from Lewis Avenue Baptist Church.
Thank you. Let's pray. Father, we thank you for the opportunity to meet like this in a free society. We thank you for who you are. We thank you for the privilege of prayer. Without the blood of Jesus Christ and his resurrection wouldn't be possible. We ask for guidance. We know we're imperfect people, but I do believe this is a group of people that want to make decisions that would please you. We certainly know that we need to be lined up with you and what you'd want us to do. Guide and direct. We ask for wisdom, and we do this in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you. Mr. Peroni is attending MTA this week, so due to his absence, I will need a motion to appoint a moderator for this meeting only.
I'd like to make a motion that we appoint Trudy Hirschberger, the township clerk, as moderator for this meeting tonight.
Second.
I have a motion by Mr. Francis, seconded by Mr. Steiner. Will you please read the roll?
Mr. Francis?
Aye.
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Ms. Hirschberger?
Aye.
Mr. Montry?
Aye.
Clemens is absent, Tinaveri is absent, and Peroni is absent.
And the motion passed. Approval of the agenda, number 2. I'm removing item 8E, purchase of property at 6602 Jackman Road, until the meeting of April 16th. Are there any other amendments to the agenda? Seeing none, can I have a motion to approve the agenda as amended?
Make a motion to approve the agenda as amended.
Motion by Steiner, seconded by
Support.
Mr. Montry.
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mr. Montry?
Aye.
Mr. Francis?
Aye.
Ms. Hirschberger?
Aye. And the motion carried. Consent agenda. The Agenda Committee recommends to approve and place on file the minutes of the March 19, 2019 regular meeting of the Bedford Township Board and appoint Cathy Beville to the Green Initiative Committee for one term ending 12/31/2019.
Motion to approve the consent agenda.
There's a motion by Steiner, seconded by Mr. Montry. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And the motion passed. We have no presentations. Public comment. Comments are limited to 2 minutes for board agendas only. Mr. Nyhan wanted to speak, and I said he could speak at this time.
Hi, everybody. My name's Jim Nyan from 8277 Argyle. I just want to, I'm here in celebration of World Autism Day, today, April 2nd. Buildings and structures, homes, and lighted up blue, especially today and the entire month of April. We're actually encouraged to wear blue throughout April when able. We started Strike Out Autism right here in Bedford Township 3 years ago, and we've currently raised $14,000 for the Monroe County ISD Educational Center, where we can buy therapeutic physical education equipment and sensory integration equipment for the kids. And we've had overwhelming support in Bedford Township where we started, and it's been just well taken by all the businesses and our residents, and we've actually spread to Monroe. And we're going to have our first fundraiser at Monroe Sports Center, and we're also in Bay City, Michigan for the first time. A lot of help through Paul Peroni, Greg Moore, and Jason Shepard, Al Pryor, and of course your support has been welcomed. This year, we plan on raising about $15,000 for the kids at the Monroe County ISD. So with that said, I brought each of you a little token of my appreciation. It's certainly not a gift. It's awareness about our events. We have and just an ending here. On my events, we have a zoo family night, April 26th at Indian Creek Zoo, which is a great night, 6 to 8:30. And then April 27th is our Bedford bowling event and our Monroe bowling event. And if you're up north, the Bay City bowling event. So we're pretty excited what we've started right here in Bedford Township. Jason Shepard is putting a resolution in, and we're excited about getting a presentation soon. So I want to thank all the residents, all the businesses, and we're still rallying. Blue lights can be picked up at Inside Out Home Inspectors, the vets, and we have free blue lights here. And of course, you can purchase a blue light at Lambertville Hardware. So it's been an amazing experience, and I'm basically here to thank everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Jim.
Oh, I'm okay.
No problem. Do we have other public comment?
That's okay.
Thanks.
Thank you, Lamar Frederick, 3254 Deer Creek Drive. I came here to talk about the purchase agreement that you just took off. I'm still going to make some comments because I think it's important. Number one, I took a look at this document, and I don't know who the seller is. It's not on here. It's a blank document. Counselor, you and I would never let that happen. But I did know how to go find out who the owner of the property is, but the average citizen out here may not know how to do that. I don't know how you reached a purchase price of $65,000 for this property. I asked for some appraisals. There are none. I asked a couple of the board members, how did you reach this number? I'm not clear on how this board or the supervisor came up with $65,000 for these properties. There's nothing in here in terms of transparency for me to understand how you reached that number. There are several provisions in here. Number one, the inspections, I don't care how you do those, but if it's an additional cost, it adds on to the $65,000. There's a provision in here about completing a phase 1 environmental study. I really endorse that, because once you become part of the chain of title, if there are any issues with respect to environmental, you are on the hook with everybody else. So make sure that you contract to get that done. I looked at the last paragraph, which has all of these contingency in it, and I think I would ask Mr. Goldsmith and I would ask Mr. Graham to review that again, because it would appear that you could agree to extend this contract for 15 years, because it simply says if you don't close in a certain amount of time, you can agree to continue on. Why do you want to do that? There ought to be some kind of a termination in there. And I don't know why the supervisor signed this document before this board gave approval. But it's already signed, and so I guess maybe he thought this was just going to fly through here without any difficulty. I think there's some problems in this document. I think there's some issues in this document. And I think you should have thought a little bit more about getting some appraisals before you establish the value of this. I'll be back later. Thank you.
Thank you.
Gail Kane, 1056 West Temperance. I too was going to speak regarding this, the property. First off, I don't approve of my tax dollars being used to pay for a roundabout. I don't think it's necessary. My concern is there is one topic on this agenda who would benefit greatly if this roundabout was put in because of what they would consider to be disbursement of their traffic. And I don't have a problem with that. But I have a concern with the funeral home, how somebody coming from the west entering into this roundabout would then know that the funeral procession that's coming from, let's say, the east. Secondly, in reviewing minutes of the 6/5/2018 meeting, we had some back padding, how we reduced the fire department's budget by $20,000, the police by $20,000, the park by 10, library by 30, and the DDA by $500,000. And then we're going to spend this amount of money. And Lamar is going to speak to some more of the concerns, so I won't reiterate all of that. But if you recall, our supervisor dedicated $80,000 that we did not have yet in our coffers last year to this project. And I have since learned that it was not the road commission who approached the township, but the township. One particular person approached the road commission seeking them to find money to make this happen. Folks, we got some major backdoor discrepancies taking place, and the board members are not being fully made aware. And you want to know why I have some concerns with some of the other committees that are in place.
Thank you.
Tim McAfee, 9837 Pamela Drive. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to be at the last meeting, but in reading the minutes, Mr. Graham stated concerning a morals clause, which Mr. Steinert brought up, that this is something we don't want to rush into. I'm probably going to have to spend 6 months and bill the township, a few hours a week here and there. It's my understanding that the Michigan Township Association has a number of documents on file of townships in the state of Michigan that already has morals clause that's been approved by the Michigan Attorney General's office. I spoke with the Michigan Attorney General's office yesterday, but I have not been able to get hold of anybody from the Michigan Township Association. Maybe Mr. Goldsmith could inform Mr. Graham and look into that and, well, I don't know, say next meeting, why don't we have half a dozen different morals clauses that are already in effect for our board members to look over. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any more public comment? Okay, moving on. Staff reports, request to approve a resolution amending the 2018-19 general fund budget. Mr. Manning?
Thank you. This is the second budget amendment for this current fiscal year. I'm reducing property taxes down $27,000 to the estimated receipts that we'll receive from the Treasurer's Department. Some items were recorded as miscellaneous income, insurance claims of $27,000, Blue Cross premium rebate of $6,000. Part of that Blue Cross rebate was shared with staff. I'm just going to hit some of the major ones here. Building and grounds, contractors and services, increasing that by $28,000. Lighting for the township hall is $11,600. Mold abatement, $15,600. Building inspections, medical costs will go up because department head added his 2 children on that. Public drains will increase $11,000 to match what was paid to the Monroe County Drain Commission in March. Community action, $30,000 increase resulting from the Mulch King, $9,000. Shared police officer, $13,300. And retiree health care, increase that up to the maximum amount, an increase of $7,000. Any questions, comments, concerns?
Any questions? If not, I'm looking for a motion.
Madam Chairman, I move that we accept and approve the resolution to amend the 2018-2019 general fund budget as presented.
Motion, second?
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Steiner. Would you please call the roll?
Mr. Francis?
Aye.
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mr. Montry?
Aye.
Ms. Hirschberger?
Aye. And the motion passes. 6B, request for approval of a resolution amending the 2018-2019 special funds budget. Mr. Manning?
Once again, this is the second amendment on the original budget. I've reduced property taxes in the fire district to reflect the actual revenue that's projected to come in. Miscellaneous revenue has been increased to reflect ambulance runs. HRA will require additional $5,000 for the full-time firefighters. Medical supplies will increase 15. And membership dues publications will increase 7,000 for various books and manuals.
Do we have any questions? Oh, you keep going?
I'm sorry.
Okay, keep going.
DDA, that has to be increased $35,000 because the funds that we got from Monroe Road Commission, their improvements were not made and they wanted their money back. So those are the highlighted items.
Do we have any questions for Mr. Manning? If none, I look for a motion.
I make a motion to approve the resolution to amend the 2018-2019 special funds budget as presented.
Do I have a second?
Support.
Any discussion? Will you please call the roll?
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mr. Francis?
Aye.
Mr. Montry?
Aye.
And Mrs. Hirschberger?
Aye, and the motion passes. 6C, request for payment of the fire department radio activation fees to the state of Michigan. Mr. Massengill?
Good evening. This first item is the activation fees for the radios that we're set to receive from the county through their 911 surcharge funding. So currently, and we've discussed this with the board before, we were facing about a $250,000 to $300,000 budget hit in the next few years as these 18-year-old radios that we're using right now, they're being phased out. We can't get parts for them anymore. Motorola no longer is doing servicing on them. So we were struggling with how we were going to overcome that when the county 911 surcharge was voted in last fall. And the county subsequently went with some group purchasing and purchased for both law enforcement and fire radios. So we'll be able to replace all 64 of our radios, contingent on paying the one-time $250 per radio surcharge to the state of Michigan, which is essentially an activation fee. So this portion is going to be on us. Once we pay that activation fee, the state will turn the radios on, we'll get the programming for them and be able to in-service 64 new radios.
And what's the value of those radios approximately, Chief?
$250,000 to $300,000.
So overall, pretty good bang for our buck.
Oh, absolutely. Not only that, we would have had to pay had we funded it ourselves, we would have had to pay the activation fee as well, so.
Yeah, we'd had to struggle with those numbers,
Yes.
paying that out of pocket.
Correct.
Do you have any other questions?
This may have already been answered, if so, I didn't hear it. Is this an annual fee or a one-time fee?
It's a one-time fee.
It replaces what used to be like a one-time, right? Or it used to be like a semi-annual.
Years
Something
ago,
or other,
years
yeah.
ago, it was a Mike fee, they called it, so per year for the state system. At some point, a couple of years ago, they changed that to a one-time activation fee now. So yeah, there's no annual fee, or there's no other annual fee that will go along with these radios.
What's the life expectancy with these radios?
We expect probably another 15 years or so, or we hope for another 15 years or so. The Motorola, the brand is stood up, and like I said, we've got, I believe, close to 16 or maybe 18 years out of the existing ones. So it's certainly time to upgrade them. We would expect another 15 years.
There's no other questions. I'm looking for a motion.
Madam Chair, I would like to make the motion to accept the quote from the state of Michigan, one-time activation fee for 64 radios as presented by the fire department in the amount of $16,000. And again, that's a one-time fee for these new radios.
Support.
Supported by Mr. Francis. Any discussion? Will you please call the roll?
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mr. Francis?
Aye.
Mr. Montry?
Aye.
Ms. Hirschberger?
Aye, and the motion passes. 6D, request to approve the appointment of Mike, can you please help me here?
Komorowski?
Komorowski, Matt Young, and Dustin Cunningham to the Township Fire Department as probationary paid on-call members.
Yes, so this is just the appointment of 3 more of our candidates from the last pool. We ran 6 through the physical agility test, and 4 of the 6 passed. We opted to defer the 4th one into what we expect to be a fall class, but bring 3 of them on immediately. So with your permission, we'd like to bring them on. Mr. Komorowski is a licensed DMT, and should be a certified firefighter as well, with a class that's graduating out next month from the county. He should be going to Station 3 for his orientation period. Mr. Young is enrolled in our EMT program that starts in May and will attend fire class in the fall. He and Mr. Cunningham, who's a licensed EMT and is in paramedic class, should be enrolling in the fire school in the fall as well. They'll both be Station 1 candidates for their orientation if they're approved.
Any questions? None, I look for a motion.
Madam Chair, I make the motion to approve the appointment of 3 additional firefighters, Michael Komorowski, Matt Young, and Dustin Cunningham, as presented by the fire chief.
Support.
Just a quick comment, Chief, keep them coming, because I saw your work week this week, and you and I had about 2 minutes to talk about that, and unbelievable numbers you guys had this week.
Yeah, it's been a pretty busy couple weeks. So.
Yeah.
Incidentally, the last 2 years, we've run 2 recruiting classes, a spring and a fall. We expect to run 1 more in the fall, but our hope is to go back to an annual basis as our numbers have come up. We hope that we'll be able to just go back and once a year be bringing candidates through. So.
Okay, I have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? If none, please call the roll.
Mr. Steiner,
Aye.
Mr. Francis,
Aye.
Mr. Montry,
Aye.
and Ms. Hirschberger.
Aye, and the motion passes. 7, unfinished business, request for direction on Bedford Township Fire Department full-time employee manual. Chief?
I think Mr. Goldsmith is probably in a better position to
Okay.
to handle this.
I'll take it, and the chief can fill in the blanks. On March 21st, Chief Massengill, our labor attorney, Phil Nance, and I had a 2-hour meeting. It was actually a very good meeting. A lot of good, healthy, and frank discussion concerning the full-time firefighters, the paid-on-call volunteer members, the condition of the Bedford Township Personnel Policy Manual as it relates to our regular full-time employees who work here at the Township Hall. And through that discussion, a lot of concerns were brought up. Let me start first with the paid on-call volunteers. We have a lot of different policies and amendments to policies that really are all over the board, and that needs to be cleaned up. It really does, because to effectively administer the department and to effectively and fairly deal with, for the chief to effectively and fairly deal with, and for this board to effectively and fairly deal with personnel issues as they come and go, disciplinary issues as they come and go. Fortunately, we don't have many, but when we do and when they arise, you want to have one comprehensive set of policy or procedures to deal with. And what we have found in the past when dealing with some issues, we've had to piecemeal it together, and that's not a good thing. And it's not a good thing for the chief to have to administer his department in that regard. There's a significant difference between the full-time firefighters and the paid on-call volunteers. Not significant in terms of their ability, their training, and their expertise, but there's a significant difference in terms of scheduling, hours, probationary periods, experience, things of that nature. So, after putting our heads together and discussing all of this, I believe it's our collective recommendation to the board that we do several things. One, Phil Nance, Chief Massengill, and myself, and of course Chief can speak for himself, recommend to the board that instead of trying to integrate the full-time firefighters policy manual into and with the employee manual for all other township employees, instead of integration, we believe that there should be one standalone policy for full-time firefighters, and that would encompass the newly hired firefighters under the SAFER grant, and that would also include our fire inspector. It would not include the chief. He will soon be under contract with the township board, as one is being developed now by Phil Nance, and actually the three of us are working on that together for presentation to the board. So one policy to deal with just full-time firefighters. Don't know how soon it will happen or when it will happen, but I think we're all, if we think it's not going to happen, we're fooling ourselves, or we're putting our head in the sand. But I think we're going to be in this township with the number of people that we have in this township, that we're probably going to be hiring more full-time firefighters in the years ahead. And so why not get it right now and have it right as we move forward? So that's recommendation number one. Recommendation number two is that we develop a standalone policy for our paid on-call volunteers with no integration between the full-time and the paid on-call volunteers. A standalone policy that would integrate all of the policies that are out there, and there are a number when you start looking at it and you look at meeting minutes and you look at amendments and addendums, all of that needs to be pulled together into one policy for the paid on-call volunteer members. That's recommendation number 2. That will require some modifications to the employee manual that takes care of and addresses all the other employees of this organization, the employees that work here during the daytime at the Township Hall. Not a lot, but some modification, because there's references to firefighters, or they've been under that umbrella for a period of time. So that's the recommendation, the third recommendation. And as the board knows, we have what sometimes are referred to as SOPs, Standard Operating Procedures. Chief and I talked about, I think they're called now SOGs, is that right? Standard Operating Guidelines. That will be a 4th document, and currently is a 4th document. That's the document that the chief uses, that the department uses for guidelines pertaining to, for example, how to fight a fire, how to respond to emergencies, what's the protocol, who's the officer in charge, things of that nature, which you don't have in a personnel manual, so to speak, but they're guidelines that the chief uses to run the department, see to the orderly dispatch of our firefighters and how a scene is run. So I think the chief feels pretty comfortable with that. There may be some tweaking that's needed. So those are our recommendations. The chief may want to speak to that and should, but we need authorization from the board. I just didn't want to go off and do it, even though as your legal counsel, I think that's a good thing to do, and we should do it without the board taking a look at it, considering it, and giving us the approval to go forward. And if you do, it will be the chief, myself, and Phil Nance doing that and going through it. We'll take the document that Chief Massengill and I prepared for the full-time firefighters, and that's a really good start. That gets us probably 50% or more of the way there. But there's a lot of references in there that we want to remove, because it does attempt to integrate with the other policy. And there's a provision in there that I put in there, to the extent that this document makes a statement that's not mentioned in another document, or to the extent that they might be in conflict, this document controls. We don't think it's efficient for the chief to have to look at 2 or 3 documents to figure out which document controls, thus our recommendation. So I'll be quiet, you can discuss it, and the chief, if he wants to add anything to that.
Yeah, there's no better explanation than that, clearly. Thank you, sir. We hope that moving forward that the board gives the approval to start working on this. I think Mr. Goldsmith shared accurately the struggles that we have when we're trying to reference different documents or different eras of documents in trying to enforce policy or trying to make sure that we're following policy. So it's been a little bit tricky, and I think this is probably something that may be a little bit overdue to get working on it, but our hope is that as soon as we can finish this up and get it presented to the board, that we will have a set of documents so that not only we as administrators understand the expectations, but also so the paid-on-call firefighters or the full-time firefighters themselves have a good understanding of the expectations. So it's like our new group that comes in, we're referencing a lot of documents during their orientation to make sure they understand what's expected of them, and that can be confusing even for the firefighters themselves. The SOGs are also, we have been working concurrently on our standard operating guidelines, which again is the operational aspect of the fire department. And we hope to have something done within the next few months. The officers have reviewed them. The assistant chief and I continue to review them and fine tune them. But we hope to have something, an updated document in the next few months that we can present to you. I think normally our risk management, our insurance carrier, typically has a look at them to make sure that they're in agreement with them. At least that's been my past experience. So we're working pretty hard to prepare that as well.
So I don't know if the board feels comfortable. There's 3 members absent. If the board feels comfortable in authorizing us to move forward, or if you would like us to make this presentation when you have a full board, I guess that's something to think about, but we are looking for guidance from the board on this. And we think it's important. I think it's important from a legal perspective. The chief believes it's important from an administrative perspective. And the 2 of those dovetail when we have disciplinary issues, which fortunately, again, they're not very common, but when we do, you want to make sure that the policy's in place, that you're fair, and that you're consistent with those who you are governing.
Comments?
I think it's
Questions?
important that we move ahead with that. I think it is very important to us as board members, as firefighters, and as a community of 32,000 plus residents. We have a very good fire department. We don't want to lose that. We want to make sure that we are administering it as efficiently and effective as possible. And I think this will help. So I think we should move ahead with that. I don't know if that takes a motion or just a consensus of the board, or
I
would
would
be
prefer a
appropriate?
motion, if the board members who are here this evening feel comfortable in doing that. I would prefer a motion. I think the chief would prefer a motion. It's, you know, so that we can move forward, and Phil Nance, I think would also prefer a motion so that he's comfortable that the board wants us to move forward in a positive way and pursue this work and get it done in an expeditious manner.
So I have a question. This is 4 separate documents?
Yes, and not so much, I doubt that Phil Nance and I will do much with the SOGs. That's, the chief does that. I think he may have some questions for us to review, but I think that is more of a administrative function that he and his assistant chief and the other officers have been working on and feel comfortable with. I don't know a thing about firefighting procedure, but that's their area of expertise. That's what they excel in. So that won't require legal work. But the 2 policies as it relates to our paid-on-call volunteer members and our full-time firefighters, that will require some additional legal work. And then that will, so that we don't have any disconnects, we're going to take a look at the personnel policy that pertains to all other employees to make sure that we don't have any crossover there. So really the creation of 2 separate documents, one of which is a long way to being created, and then it will take, what we'll have to do is when we go through that process, to make sure that we identify all these policies that are floating out there and just get rid of them in favor of the new one.
Okay. Is this a rewrite, or are we going to use what Adam submitted and that you and Adam had gone over?
We're going to use that, and some of that will be written, because now if the board approves this, we're going in a separate direction. As I worked through it and communicated with Adam and then communicated with Labor Council, and I brought it up during the meeting because we went off on one tangent, so to speak, and talked about making sure the documents are integrated. And then, you know, I asked Adam and I said, you know, I don't feel comfortable with this. I think it should be its own document and have everything in it that needs to be in it for full-time firefighters, and I think we need a separate document. And so after we went back and forth, and believe me, we had some spirited conversation, didn't we? We all came to the conclusion that, yeah, that would be the best thing to have from an administrative point of view.
Okay. I don't know if the other board members are concerned, but what kind of money are we looking at with 2 attorneys?
Well, Phil will be taking, I think, more of a lead on this. You know, he's got the work that I did. I can't give you a quote, but we're certainly not going to run up the bill. You know, try to get it done. But I think it's important. It's important.
Yeah, I understand it's important, but I want to know where
Yeah.
it's going to fall.
I really can't give you a quote, and I don't know if Phil would give you a quote.
Okay. And you have this in your budget?
We haven't budgeted for, with this year's budget, we haven't budgeted for legal fees in excess of, I think, what we have. We upped our budget, I believe, for next year and included some additional legal fees. So, yes, we've got increased funds, but as we don't have a real good expectation, I can't comfortably say yes or no, I guess, at this point.
Okay.
You know, and I think it's going to be simpler to have 2 standalone documents than spend a lot of time going back and forth and trying to integrate provisions to make sure that one doesn't step on the other, so to speak. So I think it's, from that standpoint, it's going to be simpler to be able to deal with that. And Phil's expertise, because he deals day in and day out with labor matters, is making sure we're compliant with all state, federal laws and regulations in terms of number of employees and what does apply and what doesn't apply. We had a lot of discussion during our meeting on that, and I won't go into the details, but that's going to be a lot of what he oversees, and that's important because we have a lawyer in our audience who has done this type of work before, and Lamar and I have worked together. He can tell you that it's very important to comply with those federal laws and regulations as they relate to employee relations. So that I will feel much more comfortable that we're compliant.
Yeah, I agree. I just want to make sure that Adam's not shocked by a bill.
We'll try not to shock him. He and I work pretty closely together. It's been a pleasure to work with Adam. It really has been. And I'm sincere when I say that. He's a great administrator.
Okay. Any other?
Just real quick, one of the things I can say, you know, we definitely need to have compliance. Going forward, I think over the past number of years, we've progressively gotten better with the administrative processes and everything that are taking place. You're well on the right track, but one of the things I think it also attests to why you are getting more and more interest with your firefighters. People are seeing a good, well-rounded, structured organization forming here, and I think it's something that people want to be a part of. If somebody has a willy-nilly department and, doesn't have a lot of good standards, a lot of people aren't going to take interest, and I think that's a testament to what's going on right now within the department. And we definitely have to make sure we have everything ready for compliance, no matter what hits us down the road, with all the laws and regulations, again, especially from an employee standpoint. So I agree that we do need to get something in place and continue with this department, because we are, as Mr. Goldsmith stated, we will end up with more full-time firefighters down the road as we continue.
Any other?
I guess I'd like to make a motion, if it's appropriate now, to approve moving forward with legal counsel in developing these manuals with a cost at this point of $7,500, not to exceed. If we need more money, at least we'll know where we are.
It's fine.
I don't know if that's a good number or high or low, but I think we need to at least have some idea where we're going with this so that we don't get in and get a $50,000 bill. Oh, we didn't know
No,
that.
it
won't be anywhere near
No.
that, but
And I just don't know, I can't speak for Phil, so, but I've known Phil for 30 years, and we worked together for those 30 years, so, he's efficient in what he does, and his hourly rate is fair and reasonable, so it will be fair. But that's fine, to set that to set that, and then if for some reason it's gonna be more than that, or we reach a point, well, we'd bring it back to the board, but I really don't envision that happening.
Okay, I have a motion. I need a second.
Second.
Second by Mr. Steiner. Any discussion? Will you please call the roll?
Mr. Francis?
Aye.
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mr. Montry?
Aye.
Ms. Hirschberger?
Aye, and the motion carries. 8, new business, request for vouchers for payment. I'd like to make a motion that the following vouchers be approved for payment. General Fund, $26,247.39. Fire District, $4,632.50. Police Fund, $104.22. Park Fund, $4,827.66. Library Fund, $1,041.68. Water Revenue Fund, $2,500. Enchanted Forest SAD, $162.86. Canterbury Forest SAD, $37.14. Indian Acres SAD, $90,252.44. Mohawk Trails SAD, $1,301.25. Mildred Drive SAD, $2,465.38. Springbrook SAD, $1,979.68. Lewiston Estates SAD, $5,891. Downtown Development Authority, $125. Sewer O&M Fund, $2,734.56. Trust and Agency Fund, $796, for a grand total of $145,098.76.
Support.
Supported by Mr. Francis. Any comments? Seeing none, can you please call the roll?
Ms. Hirschberger?
Aye.
Mr. Francis?
Aye.
Mr. Montry?
Aye.
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
And the motion carries. Next is request to rezone from R2B One Family Residential District to PUD Planned Unit Development on parcel number 5802-033-04905, 6685 Jackman Road. We do not have a planning representative here tonight. Did the developer, do you want to speak to it at all, or?
Madam Chairman,
Yes.
also, we probably should notify the developer that we have 4 members tonight, and a rezoning by law requires 4 votes. It requires a majority of those members elected and serving, so you have to convince all 4 of them.
You want to go forward?
Yes.
Okay. So this is the Apple Creek Estates our rezoning of the parcel before we can go to the final PUD approval. Do we have questions regarding this? Anyone have questions?
Well, all the reviewing agencies have signed off on that rezoning with some contingencies, and I think we should approve it subject to those contingencies being met or satisfied.
Right, I have a motion, actually.
Good.
I make the motion that we rezone parcel number 5802-033-04905 from R2B Single Family Residential to PUD Plan Unit Development for Apple Creek Estates, a 20-unit condominium PUD project off Jackman Road, north of Smith Road, for the following reasons. The parcel noted will be developed into 20-unit condominium project. The rezoning is consistent with the township master plan for the area. The rezoning is consistent with single-family residential use in the area. The Township Planning Commission recommended approval of the rezoning, and the Monroe County Planning Commission has recommended approval for the rezoning.
Support.
Motion support. Any discussion? Will you please call the roll?
Ms. Hirschberger?
Aye.
Mr. Francis?
Aye.
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mr. Montry?
Aye.
And the motion carries. 8C is then the final PUD, final site plan. And I spoke to Jody upstairs, and all the units look like they have approved it. There are a couple stipulations here, but other than that, I have a motion. Make a motion that the final approval of the Apple Creek Estates PUD Plan Unit Development and approval of the final site plan on parcel number 5802-033-04905, located off Jackman Road, north of Smith Road, provided the developer complies with all issues noted in the letters from Manick and Smith Group, the Monroe County Drain Commission, the Monroe County Road Commission, and the Bedford Township Fire Department prior to any development. The developer obtains all required and necessary permits from the Michigan Department of Environmental Quality regarding wetlands. The developer installs solar lighting, which shall include an entrance light and street lights, thus eliminating the need for a special assessment district. Should solar lighting be eliminated for any reason, the developer shall work with the township clerk to establish a special assessment district. The PUD agreement be entered into between the developer and the township. The master plan be submitted to the township attorney and Manick and Smith Group for review and approval.
Second.
The master deed, I think I misspoke. The master deed be submitted.
You gotta reread the whole thing.
No, I'm not going to reread the whole thing. It was the last part. The master deed be submitted to the township attorney, Manick and Smith Group for review and approval.
I agree with that, Chair.
Motion by Hirschberger, second by Steiner. Any discussion? Will you please call the roll?
Ms. Hirschberger?
Aye.
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mr. Francis?
Aye.
And Mr. Montry?
Aye.
And the motion carries. Thank you. 8D, request for approval of a corrected Monroe County Road Commission contract for Crab Road from Samaria to Relk Road.
I'll take this one.
Okay.
At the March 19th board meeting, we approved the contract that the road commission drafted in the amount of $320,648. That original draft contract indicated that the road commission was paying 100%. That was an error. It should have been the township paying 100%. I missed that, but I certainly didn't after I started to read that that evening and contacted the road commission. And I thanked them for giving us $320,000 that they didn't think they did. And they said, what are you talking about? At least I tried. So what this contract is only switching from column to column in who pays for it. It doesn't change anything else. It's Crab Road from Samaria to Rauch. It's .99 miles. It's a trenching to widen it a little bit. It's base stabilization and 2¼ inch hot mix asphalt surfacing for that. That road hasn't been touched for decades, and it desperately is needed. So all we're doing tonight is correcting an error in the writing of the contract that we approved on the 19th of March. So I guess I move that we approve this one as corrected.
I'll second for discussion. Mr. Francis, just a quick question. I think we talked about this briefly. That money has already been part of the pavement asset management plan that we put together for our 5-year plan, right? This is already incorporated into that.
Oh, yes, yes.
I just wanted to point that out, that money is already considered. This is not something that's over and above.
That's correct.
Okay, I just want to clarify that for the audience.
Okay. And in your motion, is it all right if we put the amount and that it's township?
I thought he did. Oh,
Just to make sure it's in there.
in the total amount of $320,648, the township paying 100% of that cost.
Thank you. Discussion? Seeing none, will you please call the roll?
Mr. Francis?
Aye.
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mr. Montry?
Aye.
And Ms. Hirschberger?
Aye, and the motion carried. E, request to approve financial support for the Bedford Senior Center. Do we have any representative that wanted to speak? Does anybody have questions for the representative before I make her walk all the way up here?
This is the revised list.
Be nice to Mark, she's a senior.
Carol Frederick, 3254 Deer Creek Drive, Lambertville. I am a member of the Senior Center. I am a member of the Center's Advisory Board. I had seen this on the agenda, and that's why I'm here. I have no clue. So you guys want to do your thing first, and if I can answer a question, I'll do my best. If not, I'll tell you I can't, and then you have to go to the next stage up.
Okay. The board is being asked to contribute to the Bedford Senior Center $12,500, and this is the amount that this board contributes every year. So, do we have?
Are there any
Motion, discussion?
encumbrances on that amount, as in you're directing it for specific uses?
No.
Just goes into our general account? Okay. And you've talked to Diane Carroll, the current center director?
She's the one who drafted the letter to us
Okay.
requesting it,
All righty.
which is something we ask for every year, because we
Okay.
can't do it without her request first.
Okay.
Do we have any questions, concerns? Do I have a motion?
Madam Chairman, I move that we approve the request from the senior center to contribute toward their operating expenses at the Bedford Senior Center in the amount of $12,500 for this coming year, as presented.
Motion by Mr. Francis, do I have a second?
I get second.
Second by Mr. Steiner. Discussion?
Can I ask a clarification and make sure I'm on the same page? Okay, this is for operating only. Am I corrected? I heard Paul say operating.
Well, I didn't want to restrict it because they didn't specify how they would spend it, but
I'm just clarifying so that,
It actually
Does
says in
say
here,
on
the
here.
township support for the center's programs helps to ensure the health, nutritional, educational, recreational, and especially our Meals on Wheels program
okay.
that now
would be
ranges
operating,
98 per day.
yeah. Okay, great, okay. Thank you.
Okay. I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, would you please call the roll?
Mr. Francis?
aye.
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mr. Montroy?
Aye.
Ms. Hirschberger?
Aye, and the motion carries.
Thank you very much on
You're welcome.
behalf of our ultra-mature people. We thank you for your support.
Thank you. Moving on to F, request for approval of $1,500 for tire collection at the annual spring cleanup. I think, Al, you were going to speak to this one?
What that basically is that last year, the Monroe County Health Department had a grant to pay for the tire pickup, which we filled up like a semi-load. This year, they don't have that funding, and beautification has not spent their money, and that money was transferred over to the new committee. So we'd not be, these funds were already budgeted. We would just like to use it to do another tire pickup with the spring cleanup. And these tires are recycled, so they're not just thrown into a landfill. So that's what we're trying to accomplish. Any questions?
Any questions?
Just, I know that I talked to the supervisor about this, like ensuring that, that it's a residential use, and I don't know if we were gonna put a limit on, like, how many each person could bring or anything this year.
That's a good question. We are going to put a limit because last year we found out the oldest tires we collected were from a 1937 tractor that were like 5 feet tall. So we are going to be putting limitations, and not, you can't bring trailer loads and so on. So I'll be talking to the trucking company, and I think we're going to limit maybe 2 to 4 tires at the most per family.
And then the only other thing was that this came about from that grant, and that we were kind of, let's put that out another year, but then it's not gonna be, this isn't gonna be necessarily something that's gonna be done
Every year.
perpetually, yeah.
Right,
So-
because next year the Monroe County Health Department may get funding for it. So then we would just request it from them, or we may not even do it since we are doing it 2 years in a row.
But to like kind of get the word out that you got tires lying around,
Get them in now.
bring them in, this is your chance, you're not necessarily gonna have this opportunity
Exactly.
Okay.
And this is Bedford residents only?
Correct. Yep.
Okay, any other questions? Seeing none, do I have a motion?
Madam Chairman, I move that we approve spending up to $1,500 for this tire recycling or collection program as stated.
Motion by Mr. Francis, do I have a second?
I'll second. Is that coming out of that budget then, out of that fund?
Green Initiative?
Yep, okay.
Yes.
I'll second.
I have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? Rick?
And just very clearly that, and this may need a friendly amendment, I know Mr. Pryor stated it, but that this needs to be, passenger car vehicle limited to, I'm going to say 4 tires per family, must be a Bedford resident, and proof of ID when they arrive to the cleanup site.
Does everyone agree with that amendment?
For sure.
Mr. Francis?
I hate to put a limit on it. What if somebody comes in with 5 tires?
Their spouse
That's
has
what
to
he had
bring
in
theirs
his, that's
driver's
what he had in his
license.
backyard. I don't care.
Okay.
Fine.
Motion and second. Will you please call the roll?
Mr. Francis?
Aye.
Mr. Montroy?
Aye.
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
And Ms. Hirschberger.
Aye, and the motion carries. G, request to approve spending up to $2,500 for removal of dead deer. Al, are you taking this one too? And here's where we could ask this question to our attorney. If we hire someone to remove dead deer, we call them up, say, remove this, do they have to be insured, licensed? That was a question we were getting asked. Because currently, the gentleman we would be using is from the county. So, but then we heard from someone else that, oh, we have somebody that does it a lot cheaper than that, but they're not licensed, they're not insured.
State licenses people to pick up deer. How about squirrels?
I'm just asking to make sure that we're all on the
No
same
wonder our
page.
state budget is so high.
Depends on how dead they are. If they're freshly dead, you can have a lot of people
Oh,
wanting to
we don't have
pick
to
them up
call
and
anybody then, they
butcher
just
'em.
get picked up.
I guess here, Paul raises a good point. They license people to pick up dead deer. I guess the concern that I have is that if they're going to be in the public road right of way, it could create a traffic hazard. So to that extent, you would like to have somebody who would be have insurance at least on their motor vehicle. There are certain regulations depending on, again, if it's a fresh kill, the police officer who is there policing the accident. Now I'm going back, 40 years when I was doing this. There were certificates that you would authorize somebody to take the deer from the scene of an automobile accident. So I don't know if they still do that, but to the extent that you have somebody actually going out, picking them up, stopping in the road right away, that sort of thing, you'd want to make sure that they have a valid driver's license, that the motor vehicle they're using is insured to acceptable liability limits, so that if something did happen, that they would be covered in that regard.
Okay.
And that and require them to properly dispose of the animal. And I don't know exactly where that would be, probably
Some attorney's office would be
yeah.
good spot.
I've got all I can handle, so.
Well, the gentleman we called is, like I said, from the county. I think they do the incineration of the
Okay.
deer.
All right.
But that's why the 2,500, that would do 20 deer. I don't foresee 20 deer. I mean, I think one year we had 5 maybe, but we wanted to make sure it was covered. Do you have anything else?
Yeah, the hard part with this is that the road commission, their only policy is that they'll put lye on it. They will not take away the deer we call them. This is a countywide problem, and we probably get maybe 5, 6 of these. But the hard part is when you get somebody who calls you, who's a senior citizen or whatever, and says, look, I've got this dead deer in my front yard. I don't know who to call. They don't have the money to pay for it. They're somewhat a little bit traumatized that they have this fresh roadkill sitting there. And all we can do is tell them good luck, basically. And that's how this stems, is from the phone calls that we keep getting. So it's not like every week, but it comes up and it's a struggle. Some people don't have the money, period, and need to understand is that, you know, Bedford does have a poverty rate, and not everybody has the money to have it hauled off of their front yard. And then the road commission, if it's just in the right of way but not in the street, they come out and throw lye in it. So you got a dead carcass that's sitting there rotting, and people driving back and forth seeing the dead deer. So that's how this came about.
Any questions?
Madam Clerk,
Mhm.
when you said that the individual who's been doing it or would be doing it is from the county, is that a county employee and they're doing it on county time, or?
No, a county organization.
Okay, okay. Well, you could compare prices, but it's probably not a bad idea to have somebody who could pick it up and then have it incinerated so that, you know, you're getting rid of the spread of disease and that sort of thing. So,
No, what you were talking about, like, people coming up and, like, that'll take it for, like, for the meat, right?
but yeah, that happens if there's a fresh kill. Sometimes if the motorist, if they're a hunter who kills the deer, they'll want to take it. The police officer can give them permission to take it. They'll take it home and butcher it or take it to a butcher, but that doesn't always happen.
Well, like, is there any sort of, like, I guess, situation where you could have some sort of call list of, is there enough, we got 32,000 residents, is there, that you would be able to have something like that for, because you're saying, like, if it, I don't know what the what your window is on a fresh kill for something like that.
You don't want to wait too long.
Actually, I think,
You don't want to wait too long.
Well, that's what I'm saying, but if you're
Actually-
calling and saying it's an issue, this is some massive pressing issue that you can't have this, I'd figure you're calling in day one.
that happens more than you might think.
What's that?
That if somebody hits a deer with a car, it's killed. Probably the majority or close to it at the time, they're gonna know somebody who wants this deer. They're
I
gonna
agree.
call them, they're gonna pick it up. So we don't even hear about it, and we don't get a call about it. So
I
I
agree.
don't think we need to necessarily go down that road. I think what we're talking about here is somebody hits a deer, they don't stop, the animal dies in the road right of way, that sort of thing. Maybe a report isn't made. Maybe somebody hits it who doesn't have insurance or has other issues, and they just leave the scene, and the deer's there, and it's there for quite a long time, and it needs to be cleared up. That's probably what we're dealing with.
But
And
if that's what we're dealing with, then it must not have been, like, that's what I don't understand, where these people are calling in saying, this is this terrible thing, right? It's a terrible thing, but they had, how long till, like, before they called in, or, you know what I mean, anything like that? Like, if it's happening,
Well, like if it happened overnight and it's sitting in your front yard, you're not gonna process that deer. I guarantee you that. So that's the thing. Sometimes they might come home from work and then all of a sudden here's a carcass laying in their driveway or their front yard or whatever. I mean, if they see it just happening, yeah, that's another story. I mean, it's like, oh, I just hit the deer, or oh, I just seen it get hit in front of my house. Yeah, then you might be able to call somebody, but even then, you got to start calling pretty quick to get somebody out there.
I'm not a hunter, but I've got a family member that hunts, and when they're out in the field, they shoot a deer, especially if they're in the field, they field dress it right there, cut it open,
Right.
they leave everything there except for the carcass, and they drag it off to their car, so you just can't let that sit. So you're gonna find a rarity when you're gonna hit hit a deer that somebody's gonna be able to come pick it up unless somebody's there on the spot.
There are a lot of occasions where there's a fresh kill and the person who hits it wants it, they take it, or they know somebody and they take it and there's no problem. These are cases where nobody wants it, nobody
Right.
takes it, and maybe it's not reported for a day or two. That's what we're dealing with.
And deer run at dusk and dawn too, so it's getting dark and people may not see what happens.
Okay. Do I have a motion?
I move that we approve spending up to $2,500 for deer removal in the year, as presented.
Motion by Mr. Francis. Do I have a second? I'll second it.
One
Any-
quick-
Go ahead.
One quick question. I know we said that someone would have to prove that they're insured and everything. Mr. Goldsmith, do we need them to sign a waiver with the township that if they're in the right of way and they get hit, that even though they have motor, liability insurance and automotive, do we need them to sign something within the township if they're gonna act on our behalf that says that they hold us harmless?
It certainly wouldn't hurt to have them sign a waiver. If they're going to be the one that's called to retrieve the deer for a price, then, and they're working within the road right-of-way, it would be another level and layer of protection.
And especially if we're paying for it.
Yes.
So
Okay.
I'd suggest that as a friendly amendment, just to have that in there.
Okay. Is everyone okay with that?
Yes.
All right. Any more discussion? Seeing none, will you please call the roll?
Mr. Francis?
Aye.
Mrs. Hertzberger?
Aye.
Mr. Montry?
No.
And Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Ooh, it fails.
He said aye.
They had one no.
Oh, no, that'd be,
We don't need
one.
four, we
No,
just
you
need a
don't.
majority who's there.
Only for
You need a
the,
majority of the quorum for that.
Okay,
Right.
We're good then.
Yeah. And that passes.
just for the PUD.
Right. Comments from the public. Comments are limited to 5 minutes for each individual.
Back again, Lamar Frederick, 3254 Deer Creek Drive. As I indicated earlier, I just hit lightly on some issues that I thought were important with respect to this purchase agreement. I asked several of the board members whether there was ever a closed session to discuss this before this document became public, because obviously it's public now. I was advised they didn't think they had one, and that would have been a great time to do some due diligence on this procedure in terms of the purchase. You could have asked a lot of questions. You could have put in place several studies that would needed to be done in order to do due diligence on this particular purchase. I asked about appraisals. There are none. At least there are no records of that. So I wonder how you established, and you as a board established, the purchase price. Clearly, it is a waste of effort to go out for appraisals now because this is all published. The $65,000 is a number that you're responsible for. And so I would hope that you would do some due diligence to assure that that's a number that you're satisfied with, because that's not the true cost of this purchase. You have lawyers. Lawyers have looked at this. You have, at least as it says in here, you're going to do some demolition. That will add to the cost of this purchase. Has anyone looked at the cost of demolition? That would have been something that you could have suggested to happen in a closed session. In Detroit, which is not necessarily relevant here, cost of demolition of a residence is about $15,000. You have 2 properties that you're buying with 2 facilities on it. I don't know if you've considered at all the cost of demolition. And that should have been part of your evaluation of the property, because the property is simply worth the land less the cost to remove the improvements. That's all it is. That's a simple business statement. The Phase 1 environmental study. I worked for a corporation for 20 years. We never bought a piece of dirt without that first. Now, it is a contingent in this document that you wouldn't have to go forward if you find there are hazardous materials on it. But again, that is a cost for your engineers to do that work, and you don't even know what the timing is. So has anyone on the board done due diligence with respect to that? How long would it take? Who's going to do it? And how much would it cost? I looked at the taxes. The records for the township show that the 15 winter taxes, 16, 17, and 18 taxes are delinquent. So we checked at the county, and the county said, no, only the 17 and 18 taxes are delinquent, about $20,000, or I'm sorry, about $6,000, $7,000, $8,000. So here you're dealing with someone, and did you know that the taxes were delinquent? Again, a due diligence issue. I looked at, and I talked to this earlier, and this is on paragraph 15, and this is Tom's work, I can tell. I'm familiar with his work. I'm familiar with Phil's work. So either Phil or Tom did this. And these are the additional contingencies with respect to this program going forward. And I think each of you, both of you, all of you, should look at this paragraph closely and make sure you clearly understand it. Because obviously the first contingency is that you approve this purchase document. That's the fundamental requirement. The second one is it's being, the purchase is for the contingent upon a grant issued by the state of Michigan. I guess that's MDOT or somebody, I guess, for the roundabout. Have you all understood how much the roundabout's going to cost, what you expect for the grants? Who's seen the grant? Who's seen the information in the grant? The next is an agreement between the Monroe County Road Commission and the purchaser for the payment and how this is going to go forward. Obviously, that you won't know until it comes up, because if you don't get the grant, you're out the door. And then there's some other items in here, and I asked earlier if council would review this last part of this paragraph. Because what it says is you're supposed to have a closing within 90 days of something, but then if the 90-day closing doesn't occur, the two of you, meaning the purchaser and the seller, can in fact agree to extend all of this. But it doesn't say how many times or how far you can extend it. Clearly, it's not in the best interest to be a 2 or 3 or 4 year program down the road. So it seems to me one of the thoughts you might consider and ask council to consider would be putting an ending on how many times and how far can you extend this agreement. Maybe that's not important to you. Then there's something in here that says, oh, by the way.
Mr. Fredericks, are you almost done? Because your time's up.
Okay, I'll give you one more.
Sorry.
The 100 days thing. Well, I don't know what that means. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Sorry.
Gail Kane, 1056 West Temperance. I don't have exact numbers, but I think if you look, there's outstanding sewer and water on those properties as well. I suggest that we go with our road, take Jackman Road and go straight across to Smith Road. On a slight curve, block off that east arm of Jackman Road and make it a green space. And from now on, let's have some public meetings for such major impacts in our community. And I think that before you go and allow the autonomy of the supervisor to make a deal, that it all comes before the board, before you go and approach any entity to regulate any types of money ventures like this. After all, we approved this $80,000 last year, and I showed you where he cut to get all of that. I have another big concern. As you all know, I had an appointment in the Treasurer's Department one day, and I was back there in my meeting when Mr. Peroni approached over the top of the cubbyhole, as I call it, and interrupted the meeting that I had scheduled with the person in the Treasurer's Department. Since that time, it's come under attack by other people, and it was stated that people had gone to the supervisor and filed complaints. Well, I have done my own investigation, and all of that was blatant lies, and that's the simplest way to put it. In the meantime, another individual, Jewel Patton, came before the board. Jewel is the ringleader for the Blizzard Fest at St. Paul's there. And she submitted photos of me standing in the clerk's department while I was going through some FOIA documentation that I had. Well, I happened to be in a meeting Monday, and as you all know, the supervisor's office is the only one supposedly that is available for public in and out. I saw his door was closed, so I went to check to see if he was in there. Much to my surprise, here are 4 women who are meeting. There is no supervisor in that room. This was the committee of the Blizzard Fest, and they are not a township committee. The door was closed. The people were not in view of anyone from the township. So I ask you, if I have to defend myself from physical and verbal abuse when I make an appointment to come into this township hall, and yet here we have people who are not a township committee using the supervisor's office for whatever reason, and since nobody could see what they were doing, I don't know that they weren't digging through the drawers or anything of that nature, why it is okay for certain individuals, such as Jewel Patton and her group of people, and I can't get information as to who was taking my photos because they're not a township entity. So apparently this is an okay thing. So I'm just a little bit concerned that there seems to be a double standard. I don't know why this committee would be meeting into the supervisor's office. I have a feeling I know who allowed them in, but that individual was also not present. We got a problem, people. We've got a really big problem. I don't know what else to say. I do know that I have reported the building that was put up on the composting site without a building permit and site plan approval. We just paid that man to operate his business. You haven't paid anybody else in this community to operate their business, and he's in violation big time. I don't know. How is it that some of this stuff is okay and some of it isn't? And I do have some major concerns about some of the other committees. We've got, you know, and I ask other people, other trustees and stuff, you know, what do you know about this? And they don't know. I don't know where to go with this. I've already filed my complaints to the state attorney general. I'm not done filing complaints at the state level. It doesn't do any good to file complaints here at this level because I come under attack. I'm accused of being a liar. I'm accused of spreading rumors. You know, I have my FOIAs. That's my proof.
Thank you.
Just for clarification on that meeting, I was out of the area for about 30 minutes when Gail took her picture. That is a committee that Paul Peroni sits on. He allows them to use that. I was in that area for most of their meeting, sitting up in my front area. So that's what they were using. So they weren't totally unsupervised. There's no personal records from taxpayers in there. There's no money in there. And from last board meeting, it was discussed that the departments are allowed to let people back in their areas if they choose so. So they were not totally unsupervised for their whole meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else from the public?
Tim McAfee, 9837 Pamela Drive. In discussions with one of the pillars of our community, who has generously made a contribution to start Take Bedford Back, a political action committee. We are currently exploring the possibilities of legal action against a number of members of our township employees. Now, whether you are a paid employee of this township, an appointed member of a committee, anything that goes on in this hall is going to be under a microscope. There are a number of citizens in this community who are interested in reducing our costs, not only in this township, but putting a stop to the good old boy network that's been going on in this township for too many years. It's over, people. Wake up. You're either part of the problem or you're part of the solution. I will be making an announcement, hopefully at the next meeting, of formation of a board of directors for the Political Action Committee and a place we will be meeting before each township board meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments from the public? Seeing none. Board member comments? Mr. Montry?
The only thing I was thinking after we had already moved on was if there was some sort of timeline for the full-time employee manual for the fire department, if we're going to put any sort of timeline on that. But beyond that, I didn't have anything else.
Okay. Did you want to respond to that or no?
I can't speak for Mr. Nance. I don't know
Correct.
what
That's why I just
his other obligations are, but he's, based on our review, he's pretty deep into it based on what has already been prepared, so I don't think it's going to be a extraordinary amount of time. And so I guess that's the best I can tell you, just because I can't speak for him and what his schedule looks like.
Okay.
Thank you. Anything else? Okay. Mr. Steiner?
Just one comment. It was brought up tonight about a morals clause, which I brought up at the last meeting, more as a code of conduct / morals clause. I too have contacted the MTA. I am waiting for some information back from MTA. My plan was to get that type of information and be able to bring documents back to this board. So that is underway, but I'm waiting to get the right information that I can bring forward. That's all.
Thank you. Mr. Francis?
Well, this has been quite a meeting tonight. We've talked about a lot of things. We've had several threats here tonight. That's interesting. I think the issue that I wanted to bring up is in response to something that Lamar Fredericks mentioned. We do know what the grant is. It's $597,000. I have not seen the grant. I've seen the notification from the state that the grant has been awarded. It's a, excuse me, it's a use it or lose it grant, and it only can be spent on construction for the project at Smith and Jackman for a roundabout. If it's not, if a roundabout is not put up, the grant's gone. To me, it makes a lot of sense to consider that. That's almost $600,000 of, it's a CMAQ grant, which is a safety type mitigation grant. They don't come along very often. I was not aware that the road commission didn't initiate it until Mr. Frederick told me that today. I thought it was something that the road commission did because that's what I was told. Be that as it may, it might have been a little cart before the horse on that issue, but to me it makes good long-term sense to have a roundabout there. It also makes a lot of sense to me to have a roundabout at some point in the future at Secor and Smith, an even busier intersection. That would be a huge cost because we don't have any property that's easily obtainable for that. It would make sense to widen Secor Road to the state line so that it's at least a 3, maybe 4-lane road from Stearns to the state line to mitigate the traffic at that corner. A roundabout makes a lot of sense there. I know people don't like roundabouts, and I didn't either until I drove a few in Ann Arbor, and they make a ton of sense. It's a safety issue. I don't know how I got delayed or off on that, but anyway, we do have some work to do with this purchase. I'm a little concerned about some of the clauses in this also. I'm glad we deferred it to another meeting. We can take another look at it. Other than that, I don't think I have anything else.
Thank you. Just want to thank everybody for their comments. A lot of comments, a lot of things for us to think about, a lot of things to research before we go forward with some different issues. Other than that, I have nothing. Anything else?
Light it up blue.
Thank you.
Very good.
This meeting is adjourned.
Thank you.